For every 1,000 of us adults in the developed world, every year, one will have a severe stroke.
Why me?
One will be diagnosed with asthma.
Why me?
2 or 3 will have a heart attack.
Why me?
2 or 3 will have a thrombosis.
Why me?
Why me?
4 will be diagnosed with arthritis.
Why me?
5 with diabetes.
Why me?
5 with arterial disease.
Why me?
9 with depressive illness.
Why me?
And up to 10 with lung disease.
Why me?
Why me? Why me? Why me? Why me?
Why me?
Older people and overweight people are more at risk from all these diseases. In Leiden, in the Netherlands, there's a very special group of medical detectives, epidemiologists, who want to pin down just what are and are not the most important factors causing all these diseases. Tim and Rifang have decided to commit their lives to epidemiology.
Ja, goed zo. Elke haal laat je die boot doorglijden naar voren.
The answers are not always as obvious as you might think. For Tim, epidemiology is full of puzzles.
I love the puzzles, and many of those puzzles are very small. And we have those small puzzles in our work just every day, and that's really what I love to do.
I like this job very, very much. Epidemiology, I found, is a kind of combination of science with some philosophy, maybe. So you can always challenge yourself to think about a lot of new things from this study.
Why I get up in the morning and go there every day is because I want to know. I want to know why people get sick. I want to know what makes it happen. Is it the genes? Is it the environment? And I'm convinced it's always the genes and always the environment. It's those factors interacting. And I simply want to know why. Op het ogenblik in uw dagelijks leven last van die hartklachten, waar merkt u het aan?
Bij vermoeidheid.
Mm-hmm. U bent eerder vermoeid?
Ik ben vrij snel vermoeid. Ik ben ook vrij snel buiten adem.
Mm-hmm.
Het gaat zeer doen als ik me te druk maak.
Mm-hmm.
Dat is vervelend.
Ja.
So what is epidemiology and how did the discipline get started?
Yeah, so the observational epidemiology is to observe people and see what happens. And you look at risk factors, you look at genes. You can't randomize genes, that's something your parents did. You can't give people risk factors because that would be unethical. So whenever we want to study causes of disease, it's done in an observational manner. While the randomized trials are intervention studies, they're used to look at treatments. So there are two different fields. We're doing fundamental epidemiology, so we're looking at causes of disease, and that cannot be done in any way than to observe people. The exact start of epidemiology can't really be said. Of course, it started, as always in science, things start step by step.
170 years ago, a Dr. John Snow in London did a crucial experiment.
John Snow is a very interesting example who in the mid-1800s in London first did an observation and then did an intervention. His observational research in the middle of the cholera epidemics showed that people who got water from some sources developed cholera, and those were the downstream sources in the Thames River. And those who got it from upstream sources didn't develop cholera. And then he did an intervention. He removed the handle of a pump and showed that reduced cholera incidence. And it's a wonderful example of how you can go from observation, from understanding, to intervention, to preventing disease or making people better.
In Leiden, the university's epidemiology center was set up by world-renowned researcher Jan van den Broek.
Hi, hello.
Hi.
Epidemiology has a long history, but what kind of initiative drove you to this area?
it was dissatisfaction. So I was being trained as a resident in internal medicine, and I was dissatisfied with the type of knowledge that we had about knowing how to treat people. And I wanted to do research on a group of patients, but I didn't know how to do it. This was in the 1970s. And then I discovered that there was a strange tribe of people called epidemiologists who knew how to do studies and who knew how to do studies in human populations. And I thought, well, maybe we can use their tricks, their tools to do studies on patient populations, to apply the tools of epidemiology to clinical questions.
I was working indeed in hematology at NSBet, and I was doing my PhD like you are doing now, maybe my second year, and I was looking in hemophilia, looking at people who have a bleeding disorder, looking at their life, how often they bleed, their life expectancy, and I encountered questions and I didn't know how to answer them. Jan showed me how to solve these problems. So then, well, we solved that, we published the paper, and then I asked, well, can't I stay here for a while? And that while started almost 30 years ago.
Do you have some examples which illustrate the interesting parts of epidemiology? For example, paradoxes or controversies that took a long time to disentangle?
Well, a major controversy that we were in for 15 years, I think, was side effects of drugs. And one of them was side effects of female hormones. And I think that was a good example, which was not in Leiden, but was global, was the use of hormones after menopause. And the idea was that that would prevent heart attacks. It was given to many women. And it was seen that women who used these hormones indeed had fewer heart attacks. So the idea was it was good, it was given to even more women. The mistake was that women who used these hormones did it for a reason. They were health conscious, they were exercising, they had a healthy lifestyle, they were probably more wealthy than the women who didn't have time to buy these drugs. And subsequently there was done a randomized trial in which a random process allocated hormones versus no hormones. It was found that not only did they not reduce the risk of heart attacks, but they increased it. And personally, since so many women have used these hormones, I see that as the greatest error of epidemiology.
In epidemiology, there have been a string of surprise results which have told us how complex things really are. For example, vitamin supplementation, vitamin E, vitamin C. We've seen this across many examples whereby observationally, so I mean outside looking in at general collections of the population, it looks like these things are extremely beneficial for health. However, what we've learned as we've done trials and causal tests for their effect is that these things are highly correlated with social standing, smoking, eating, exercise, activity, and those are the things that are important, not the vitamins themselves. It is often that supplementation is a red herring.
So an association is not a cause. A simple association example I often use is grey hair and death. People with grey hair have a higher risk of dying than people with still colored hair. But that's not a cause. If it were a cause, you would live longer just by dyeing your hair, which is not the case.
An increasing number of deaths and injuries led to more than 90% of cyclists in London wearing helmets. Cause and effect, you might say. But in the Netherlands, very few people wear helmets. So are Dutch hospitals full of injured cyclists?
You should realize that if you go to London, where the few people on bikes are on racing bikes wearing helmets, it's completely different than here. But there's some research that might explain even why these things are happening, which is something like risk compensation, I think it's called. That the moment we perceive that the risk becomes lower, we hire it somewhere else or vice versa. This has been shown for, if you measure someone's cholesterol and it is low, they might continue smoking. While if you say their cholesterol is high, they might stop smoking. And similarly, maybe for the bikes and the helmets, in the Netherlands, the cars are used to bicycles, contrary to in London. The bicyclists themselves are used to having many cars around, so they're more careful. And there's actually some evidence that when people are wearing a helmet on a bicycle, cars pass them closer by than they would if they're not wearing a helmet. So when the risk is perceived to be low, people start to behave riskier.
Older people know nowadays that they have to continue to be active, so they continue cycling. But since their reflexes are somewhat slower than they used to be, we now have an epidemic of severe bicycle injuries in older people. And maybe they should wear helmets.
Die krijgen we niet zomaar mee.
Die krijgen we niet mee, hè?
Zelfs als vriendin zegt van, wil je met me mee, gaat hij gaan op een plekje liggen.
Ja.
Zo van, nee ja, moeten we niet doen, we bij een vrouwtje blijven.
Gerda de Wolf is overweight. Her weight has varied over the years, and she even had bariatric surgery some time ago.
Heeft u ook last gehad van overgewicht?
Ja, maar dat heb ik nog. Dat zal ik altijd blijven houden.
Mag ik vragen hoeveel u woog toen u op uw
Het zwaarste?
hoogtepunt was?
142.
Oh ja, dat is natuurlijk wel, dat is wel veel.
Toen heb ik een maagband gekregen.
Aha, ja.
Ben ik heel blij mee.
Hielp dat? Ja.
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 En nu heb ik gewoon genoeg iedere keer. Heerlijk.
Ja. En wanneer heeft u die maagband?
But the ways in which being overweight and becoming ill are linked are often not at all obvious. Our Leiden medical detective's biggest and most important project is called the NEO, the Netherlands Epidemiology of Obesity Study. Humans today seem to have a unique problem with obesity, not shared with other species. This may arise from our recent history as hunter-gatherers.
In the hunter and gatherer age, most of the people are dying around maybe 20 or 30 years old, and only those people who are fat enough can survive to the fertilizing age. So those fatter people are our ancestors. But after the industrialization and the urbanization, our food are excess right now. These kind of genes are not beneficial at all. They are detrimental because whenever we are the carrier of these genes, we are more prone to gain weight. And then it's very easy to get fatter and fatter. Somehow the previous good thing now becomes the bad thing for us.
The majority of people in the developed world are categorized as overweight. It is an enormous problem. I have spent a large portion of my career looking at the causal relationship between BMI, so body mass index, a measure of composition, and overweight and health. And I can tell you definitively that it's causally related to a large number of disease outcomes. However, I can tell you two things as well. Firstly, I don't know why BMI is correlated with health. And secondly, at the population level, we are terrible at changing it. And what we're trying to understand is the metabolic or disease intermediaries, the linkers between adiposity and disease. That's why big studies like this are really useful.
So what is fantastic about the NEO study is the large number of young people who are involved, who are early career scientists, who have bright ideas, who make it very lively. And because there's so many, we can make progress quite quickly.
One of the great things about epidemiology is it recruits and makes use of people from all different types of speciality. The end game for epidemiology is of course locating things that are causally related to health and disease. And as a mathematician or a clinician or a demographer or a geneticist, you have chance to contribute to something which might influence health and disease and have clinical impact.
So this is ready to be submitted to a journal?
Yes, I think it is, and I think the message is quite controversial because...
Yeah. So Tim is one of my PhD students who is looking at the effect of where body fat is stored, which can be in different locations under the skin or deeper in the abdomen.
So this is the metabolomic study embedded in the NEO study. Where
Rui Feng is a bioinformatician from China who actually did her master in Leiden, then went away for some time, and then now is doing her PhD in Leiden. And she's looking at metabolomics, it's called, the effect of all the small molecules that come into your blood after you are eating or drinking something. But just recently I saw an intervention of a blocked coronary artery in a patient who was quite obese. And what you wonder then is why her? Why did she develop this disease?
Nee. Als je dit te vaak zou doen, ben je mijn vriendje niet meer.
Oh, hoe kan je dat nou tegen mij zeggen?
Ja.
And we see people of 98 who never developed disease while they were living not so very healthy. And we see people of 40 who develop disease while they may not have so many risk factors.
Als er wat is, dan zegt u het, hè? Ik ben nu met het slangetje naar binnen. Maar als er wat is, u heeft ergens last van, whatever it is, u mag het altijd even zeggen. Afgesproken?
And our question is, on the one hand, why does this one person not develop disease? Why not he? And on the other hand, why does a person develop disease sometimes at a young age? And we want to see if we can prevent it or if we can find causes that may help others to make treatments or prevention strategies. Dus hoe ging dit? Hoe ervoer u het zelf?
Dit ging zoals ik het verwachtte, goed.
Ja, mooi zo. En u bent al heel lang bekend bij professor Hukema, hè?
Gelukkig wel.
Ja.
Dat is prettig als je dan iemand ook weer tegenkomt in zo'n situatie.
Je kent.
Dat is wel heel fijn. Dat is ook wel heel prettig.
Ja.
Many procedures like girders are done every year. These scans are from a 62-year-old male patient.
So what do we see, Wouter?
Well, as we discussed, we suspected this patient to have atherosclerosis, so a narrowing of the blood vessels of the heart, and it caused a severe narrowing over here. As you can easily see, it's not only here; it's on multiple places. It's here a bit, here a bit, here a bit, here a bit.
But that's by far the most severe.
Yeah, and then the result is like this. So, of course, you can easily imagine this is not the way to treat atherosclerosis. This is only for the focal narrowing.
Yeah.
If you want to stop other narrowings, this doesn't help.
No, but it's no prevention, of course. No, I agree.
Hallo.
Hallo, goedemiddag. Goed werk.
Merci. Ja. Nou, mevrouw de Wolf, fijn dat we hier zijn in uw huis.
Dat. Jammer dat.
Met de hond.
Ja, die hoort erbij.
Wanneer heeft u voor het eerst hartklachten ontwikkeld?
Ik was 40 net.
Aha.
En ik had pijn. Ik weet niet, een raar gevoel.
Op de borst.
Ja, en als ik dan doorliep, dan kreeg ik bij mijn armen. Vond ik heel stom.
Ja.
En dan achterlijk gedoe. Dus ik ging naar de dokter en die zei, ja, maar dat kan niet, want je bent een vrouw. Je bent te jong.
Ja, nou was je al jong natuurlijk.
Ja, dus ging niet door. Maar ik werd steeds schammeler. En ik kom bij de internist en zeg, hoe is het? Ik zeg, ja, zo raar. Ik loop een beetje door, kijk bij mijn armen. Ik zeg, gaan we even een cardiogrammetje maken.
Ja, precies.
Dus dat is gebeurd. En toen bleek het dat ik inderdaad een infarct heb gehad.
Ja.
En ja, doordat het dus te laat ontdekt is in feite, is het dus nooit helemaal goed gekomen meer.
En toen bent u geopereerd?
Ik ben 2 jaar later pas geopereerd.
Aha.
Omdat ik gewoon niet meer geen kant meer uit kon. En dat is balen.
Ja.
En toen daarna ging het soms wel beter. En als ik me koest hou, gaat het goed. Ik ben niet zo koesthouwerig aangelegd.
En hoeveel keer bent u nou totaal aan uw hart geholpen?
Gekatheteriseerd een stuk of 6, 7 keer, denk ik.
7 keer?
Ja.
Dus wat wij eergisteren hebben gezien, dat was voor u routine bijna?
Het wordt nooit routine. Nee, het is niet leuk. Het is niet prettig. Het is ook geen drama meer.
Nee. The reason we study overweight people in the NEO study is that it's well known that people are overweight have a higher risk for a multitude of disorders, ranging from diabetes to heart disease to osteoarthritis and pulmonary disease. And it's my firm belief that these people are not different from other people, that the mechanisms that are at play that cause disease in overweight people are the same mechanisms that play a role in everybody else. So I see this group as a group that has a higher risk of disease and therefore it's easier to study. And you could think about Willie Sutton's law, a bank robber who was asked, why do you rob banks? And he said, because that's where the money is.
Stuk hem op!
And so we are studying overweight people because that's where the disease is. But it will give us answers that are valid for everybody. What we decided to do when we started was to get a large group of people with overweight and obesity, where we included people who have moderate to a more extreme overweight. And we followed them through time for development or non-development of disease.
Diep in. Uit.
Go on, 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 as far as you can, as far as you can. Go on, go on, go on, go on, go on. If there's no air left, deep in again. If there's no air left, deep in again. Go on. And normal breathing.
What is special in the NEO in general is that we characterized people at baseline, so when they came for the first time, very extensively. It took 4 hours per volunteer, and unique features are the standard mixed meal and the MRI measurement. What we did by the standard mixed meal is people all got the same liquid to drink, which was a fixed amount of carbohydrates, proteins and fat. We took blood several times afterwards to see what would happen, how the blood response would be to this meal.
At the time I was 45 and I had an overweight and I was worried about my health, and that's the reason I started this investigation. I think it's very good to check your health every 2 or 3 years, like a car, and when you get older it's difficult to get in shape every day. So I have to do more to get in shape than when I was 18. My father and my uncle died of heart problems before they're 60. So it's in the family, so thus I must be worried about my health.
What is special about the MRI is that we can see, amongst others, where is the fat located, because it makes a difference. It can be directly under the skin, or it can be deeper in the abdomen, which you can't see otherwise than by MRI, or it can even be in the liver. And there are strong hypotheses that where the fat is stored determines the chance of disease.
So what I'm trying to investigate is the relation between visceral adipose tissue, which is the fat tissue around the organs in the belly, and cardiovascular disease. So we think that the visceral adipose tissue is very active, both metabolically and also inflammatory. And we think those processes could influence cardiovascular disease in people with a lot of visceral adipose tissue.
I had been a chain smoker for about 30 years, and then in '98 I succeeded to stop smoking. I gained a lot of weight, and in 10 years I gained 10 kilograms. I had, let's say, a moderate or more than moderate situation of obesity. I hope that my modest contribution to this study, I was one of 7,000 participants, will help create a picture of people who may be in risk communities.
It's very important to participate in the study because when you are ill, it's very important the knowledge about it to go further. I think that's very important to know a lot more about this illness. I do have a brother-in-law. He died because of heart failure, and he also was too fat. And it's very important to know a lot more about it.
Blood is the transportation mechanism in the body. We transport oxygen, we transport nutrients by blood. And it's also easy to withdraw from people. So blood is an easy way of looking what's happening, for instance, when people eat, but also what happens when blood is clotting or not clotting, when people are bleeding. So blood is a easy accessible mirror of what is happening.
We're here in the fridge space of the LUMC, and we have a total amount of 180 tubes per person. That's a total of all the NEO study of 1.1 million. We keep them here for at least 10 years and maybe 100.
Science is an international adventure. We work together with many groups all over the world for various questions, and we work together with people who are the best in their field. And in the NEO study we work together with several groups too, and one of those is the group in Bristol, where Nick Timpson works, who is specialized in metabolomics.
So Matt's going to tell us a little bit about what happens to the samples which have come from Leiden once they reach us here in Bristol.
This is a rack of NMR tubes. There's 96 here. And we will fill 94 of these with human serum. With each serum sample, we can identify upwards of 200 metabolites. So this really is at the cutting edge of science at the moment.
And it's worth saying alongside that there's a coupling of epidemiology and chemistry here. So something that's absolutely unique to Leiden is the food challenge study. And what we're able to do, and in very few places else can do this, is to look at metabolomic profile longitudinally through a challenge. And what I mean by that is, before people come into the clinic and have their standardized food challenge, we take a sample. That comes to Matt, alongside the results of their sampling after the challenge. And it's the difference between those 2 points which is really fascinating and novel. We haven't looked at that before. Leiden is exquisite. The data are, it's a fascinating resource because not only is there longitudinal data collected through time, but there is data collected around a specific challenge, which we know from previous work perturbs metabolomic profile.
We have a very good collaboration with Nick Timson in Bristol University. He is trying to help me disentangle what's the causal relationships between different meal response patterns to the disease outcomes.
So we like to see more than 6,000 people and 10 in the morning and with 5 research nurses. You can imagine it's an enormous planning, like a military operation, to do it well for the participants and also for the research nurses. It are all people with a name and not only the numbers. So when we have in a new study the people, we take care of them. So they have a good morning, and not as a number, but as real people.
What's special about the NEO study is the sampling. So we collected mainly overweight people with also a random sample of people with a normal body weight here from the Netherlands. And then I think what really sets us apart is that we combined a lot of questionnaires, so a lot of subjective measures, with objective measures of, for example, physical activity, of autonomic nervous system activity, of metabolic features. So I think that's really something that is specific and very special about the NEO study.
And I think what's unique from the NEO study is not only that we have a meal response in everybody to be able to measure the metabolic flexibility, but also the imaging of the body fat locations within the body. So we can relate the visceral fat within the abdomen, but even the liver fat to outcome events of disease in the end. And I think that's really special about the NEO study.
Why did you start to be in the NEO study as a cardiologist?
Well, basically, there is a link between obesity and atherosclerosis. At least there seems to be a link. The NEO is about obesity, and I'm therefore interested in the atherosclerosis part, as you can imagine. I just come from the cath lab where I treated people with atherosclerosis during the night. This was a very obese patient. Not all of them are obese, but I do want to figure out what is the relation between atherosclerosis and obesity, and it's not yet clear.
Yeah. And does genetics play a role in this as well, or can you do research with it?
Probably genetics is part of it. It's probably not all, because but in many disease process, genetics is part of it. And you can also look at the genes, because genes are nice things, because you get a random set for your parents at birth. Yeah. So we have now genes that are linked to obesity. So, and if you would say, if you have many of these genes that are linked to obesity together in one person, they should have more obesity. And if then obesity is also causal, they should also have more disease. If this set of genes is only linked to obesity, but it's apparent that it's not linked to disease, then you could wonder, is obesity really causal for atherosclerosis? So genes, gathering information on genes is also in the NEO study very interesting.
Some of the individuals might have the disease in their very early stage, not because of their detrimental lifestyle, maybe just due to their genetic variants. In my study, I really want to discover what's the genetic information hiding behind the genome.
But no matter what genes we inherit, the lifestyle we choose is crucial. For example, these days, doctors are right to tell their patients, obese or not, to take more exercise. The trouble is, we often don't take their advice.
The story of exercise is quite old. We know that exercise is beneficial for the cardiovascular system. The problem is not finding that out, and I'm not going to do any research on that. What we want to find out is how to get people to exercise, which is for sociologists and psychologists and policymakers. What we want to find out is who benefit most, who need it most, and who doesn't need intervention so much, so that we can tailor the people we need to talk to, that they really should exercise or take a drug or whatever.
But that's modest exercise. Frits Rosendaal is not happy about the way we also try to encourage extreme sports.
It has been known for a long time too that extreme sports are not good for you, and I don't really understand why governments put so much money in top sport rather than in preventing disease, because top sport is not healthy. You can see all these ex-footballers who can't hardly walk anymore. What is healthy is a bit of exercise, but we don't like that. We don't want to do it. It's a mental barrier against doing this, because we are still the same. We still have the same DNA as we had as hunter-gatherers, and it's inefficient to move if you're not hunting.
I think generally exercise is very good for everybody. Sometimes in the news you see a footballer who dies of heart attack in his 20s or his 30s. Those are cases that are very interesting, but it could also be that those footballers would have got that heart attack eventually in their 30s, even if they weren't playing football. So what is thought about extreme sports is that could be detrimental for your heart muscle. And maybe in some cases that is true, but the debate about that is still not finished, and there are also some people that find controversial findings about that, so that the extreme sports may not be that bad for your heart muscle after all. With most lifestyle habits, it's not good to overdo them for anything.
Elke haal samen los, strak door 3 en dan heb je tijd om samen door te glijden naar voren.
NEO is a unique resource to the epidemiological community and highlights one of the reasons why we're still extremely excited to do epidemiology today. NEO is collecting genuinely unique and novel information about how we respond at the level of metabolites to standard challenges like food and things in our environment. We simply do not know how that interacts or delivers health or disease. We've never tested it before. And it just highlights in epidemiology that there are still so many things to try and learn about, or to try and implement, to try and measure, or to understand. That's why we have to do studies like this, and that's why epidemiology is still as attractive as it's always been.
We are trying to see those risk factors on a population basis, but still we are not really able to predict for one patient will he or she get heart disease. And we might still think for one patient it's bad luck you get heart disease, even when it's genetics or overweight or smoking. And it's very difficult to know for one patient what has been his or her cause, why him or her.
Dan heeft u vast wel eens gedacht, waarom ik? Waarom heb ik dat? En heeft u daar zelf bedacht hoe dat gekomen is, die hartklachten?
En ik rook als een ketter.
U rookt te veel, ja.
Als een ketter.
Welke leeftijd was u begonnen?
14.
En wanneer bent u gestopt?
42.
Ja, dus dat is wel 28 jaar.
Ja, nou, ik moet het goed doen.
En wat ik nog wilde vragen, als u nou naar de toekomst kijkt, wat verwacht u dan?
Ik verwacht dat ik langzaam steeds minder zal kunnen. En dat ik op een gegeven moment, als het te gek wordt, zelf zeg van zo is het mooi geweest.
Ja.
En dat doe ik dan ook.
The NEO study is only in its infancy, although it's 10 years old. We're only beginning. So for years to come, we will do new measurements and new associations. And in the end, the question is all the time, why does this person get a disease at this moment in time? Why me?
Waarom ik? Dat zou ik wel eens willen weten. Why me? Why me?